Hello, my name is Andrew Geary, and welcome to Seismic Soundoff, in-depth conversations in applied geophysics. In this special episode, the microphone gets turned on me and the co-founder of Seismic Soundoff in this episode celebrating 5 years of the show. SCG Associate Executive Director Ted Bakamjian speaks with myself and co-founder Isaac Farley on the inspiration behind the podcast, our most memorable episodes, and our favorite takeaways from working on the show. This special episode honors each podcast guest and anticipates all the great conversations to come. This episode is brought to you by TGS. TGS offers a wide range of energy data and insights to meet the industry where it's at and where it's headed. TGS provides scientific data and intelligence to companies active in the energy sector. In addition to a global, extensive, and diverse energy data library, TGS offers specialized services such as advanced processing and analytics alongside cloud-based data applications and solutions. Visit seg.org/podcast to find the links to all the episodes mentioned in this conversation. Let's get started.
So, Andrew and Isaac, it's great to be on this podcast with you and to talk about the anniversary of Seismic Soundoff. And one thing that I think our audience is interested to know is what prompted the idea to pursue creating a podcast for SEG?
Well, I get started. I think I can safely speak for Isaac in this regard. I think we both loved podcasts and especially gravitated towards science-based podcasts. And for me, I really liked how the podcast had a way of highlighting and sharing about science that was easy to understand, very complicated or complex topic matters in a very interesting way. And it seemed to me, I wasn't hearing too much about geophysicists, and I was working for SEG at the time, and it just seemed like a really great way to engage the membership and engage the greater public community on the science of geophysics and just highlight the great work that geophysicists were doing and helping the public understand a little bit more about the effort and work that goes in to powering our cars and putting lights on in the house, and those types of things just seemed like a very unique opportunity to shed a little light on the hard work that geophysicists are doing every day to make our lives work.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much more to add what Andrew said, but we're not geoscientists, obviously, and our goal is to really facilitate the work of geoscientists. And so for me, being somebody who gravitates and is compelled by good storytelling was something that I always was interested in doing when I was with SEG and working with geoscientists, and continue today working with scientists. And podcasts were just such an intimate way to tell one story. In some ways, as I reflect upon podcasts and my draw to podcasts, what attracts me to them, it's almost a more intimate medium than video. And so you in the voice of a geoscientist explaining, like Andrew said, a complex topic or the history of geophysics. And it just felt like something to explore. And luckily, Ted, you gave us space there to go out and try something. And I think that was a real testament to you and to others at SCG to allow us that space to see if it would work. And it seems like it has.
Well, it was great that you brought forth the idea, and I was enthusiastic about it when you did, and have been so happy to see the results over these past 5 years.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one of the things that really sealed the deal for me and wanting to pursue this idea. And I echo Isaac. It was exciting that this was met with excitement to pursue it. But as much as geophysicists spend out in the lab, as much as we have are out in the field, and SEG has an international presence, I really liked how anyone with a phone could listen to the podcast. They could download it on their phone and then take it out in the field. It felt like such a great way to connect with the membership in particular. Wherever they were, they could take this small piece of SEG with them anywhere that they went. And it's just as well traveled as geophysicists are. It just felt like a really unique thing to bring a nice perk as well, just to the geophysicists and of the society, that here's a podcast, you could take it wherever you go, was pretty neat to me.
To further that, I mean, I think always bridging those divides between geophysicists who work in the field or who maybe are working in offices, whatever they may be. So that was one thing that was appealing, as Andrea said, but also for generational bridging of divides as well. I mean, it was really exciting in that first podcast that we did to have Sally Zinke, past president of SEG, fielding questions from new geophysicists, new geoscientists, and that was something that I was always interested in at SEG, is bridging those divides and making connections. And I was really excited to, like I said, explore that in greater detail. And Sally was awesome, and many others over the years have been great to allow us to bridge that divide.
So would the two of you talk about what it was like to put together that very first episode, Women in Geophysics? I mean, it's not something you'd ever done before, put together a podcast episode.
I had worked on a podcast before in my personal life. So it's something that I had done there and really enjoyed it and got a lot out of it. And we thought, again, like Andrew and I have said, we thought this is something that we would explore and try. And so we were kind of thinking of a way to pitch this idea, and we thought, let's just create something. And we reached out to Sally, and it was funny because Sally was more prepared to do a podcast than we were. I believe her daughter worked in television or radio, one of the two. Either way, she had access to a studio, and basically we said, trust us, and we were lucky that she did. And we got creative and found a way to reach out to students all around the world to say, what kind of questions do you have for Sally, past SEG president, leader in the field? And people sent us their questions from all over the world, and we just blended them together with Sally in the studio. So it was a lot of fun. Her audio came back and it was better than ours. So we learned lessons from her and did throughout the process. And then it was a lot of work too, to put together all of these pieces into a coherent story, which was a theme for the podcast as a whole. It was, you get this audio, and then you as an editor have to craft a story that others like. And sometimes that's easier, when you have a straightforward interview like what we're doing now. It's maybe easier to craft all that together. But in that first episode, we were really trying to tell a story and pull things all together and tell that story of women in geophysics. And luckily we had some really great champions who were open to the idea and sat down with us and talked it through, and it went from there.
Yeah, outside of a handful of episodes, I'm not sure we've worked on anything more complicated than the first one, which I don't know what that says about you and me, Isaac. But I do remember just your encouragement throughout, because it just kept taking so long, and I thought it'd be done and it wasn't done. And you just kept encouraging me throughout that whole thing. And without that, I don't think it would have got done. And I just really also just appreciated not only what Sally did in trusting us, but talking to Klaus Koster, talking to Maitri Irwin for that as well, was just great. The people that really, it was just wonderful to highlight Sally in that way, learn a little bit more about the history of just the SEG board and presidency in general. It was just a really lovely episode that still holds up today, which I think is a testament to the work that Isaac and I put in and others, but also just to the people involved in that episode that are highlighted in there. It was a special episode to work on, and one I still enjoy listening to.
Well, so that's definitely a memorable episode, and I encourage others, if you haven't listened to it, those of you in the audience, I encourage you to go back and find it, episode 1. But, Andrew, Isaac, what are your most memorable episodes?
Yeah, this was fun to think about when this question came up. A few things sprang to mind, 3 in particular. I really have loved working on the SEG Honors and Awards podcast. There's 3 of those in the archives, and just highlighting the contributions of geophysicists to the society, to the science, have just been some of the most fun interviews. Even Albert Tarantola was honored posthumously, and getting to interview a colleague and a friend of his, that was even just a lovely way to honor someone as well. So those episodes just have really, they're great listens. Just hearing from people at the top of their field and sharing their lessons and their experience has been really powerful. But just to be able to highlight their work again, it was really fun episodes to do. I feel honored that the podcast was able to speak to Vladimir Grechka and highlight his work. He just had such an energy and love for the work that he was doing, the books that he was publishing, was very eager to share that with a wider audience because he really thought he was contributing, and he was contributing something significant to the science. So having that in the archives and being able to listen to that and just have a small part of his legacy live on in that way is a really lovely thing for the SEG podcast and for the geophysics community as a whole.
Well, that was a memorable episode for me as well. And one of the things that made it memorable is not only my friendship with Vladimir over the years, but having read a portion of that book, his last book, I believe it's chapter 15, is just a discussion by him about mathematics, how much he loves mathematics and how beautiful it is. And it's a unique read for anyone who wants to go check that out and hasn't.
And personally, my conversation with Ron Harris, who was a Geoscientists Without Borders project leader in Java, really hit me at the time. I remember leaving that conversation with him just feeling different in the moment. So the chance to highlight his work and what he's doing has really had a profound impact, I would say, on my life and his story and specifically.
Yeah, that Ron Harris one is one on my list as well. His comments about preparedness and how we as humans can get through adverse times. Being prepared for those things is something I've thought about throughout the current pandemic. But even before then, there's a lot of words of wisdom in that episode. So, Ron himself and the project itself was something that was memorable and remarkable and extraordinary, and something that at the end of the day, when when we were done working on that podcast, something that, I felt 6 inches taller. I felt like, I was really proud of the work that SEG was supporting with GSW, and I was proud to be associated with those geoscientists. And I think the other bit of that, as I segue to other episodes, there's kind of a theme for those episodes that are some of my favorites, and those are the ones that are the most ambitious, which as Andrew said, I don't know what that says about me or him, but those stories where you have a lot of tape, where you need to put something together that, again, is a compelling story. Ron's was definitely that way. Andrew interviewed a handful of people for that episode, and we had to string that together in a way that highlighted their work, did justice to the great commitment and drive that they have, but then also shared it in under an hour. And that's a challenge, and one that was always fun to work on. And again, I go back to trust, for somebody to put all of that project in our hands and say, help me tell this story. Anytime someone was willing to do that, it was nice to be a part of. And so Ron Harris, that story. And then when we, again, mine are going to be some of the ones at the beginning, since I haven't worked on the podcast in a couple of years now. But when we gave the students at annual meeting recorders and had them record their experience, I think what we got back was, we didn't know what we were going to get. First of all, we said, here, take these recorders and document your experience at annual meeting. And what we got back was a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of depth. And again, something that we had to sit down and edit and make into a story that we were proud of and that they would be proud of. And again, we're thankful that they trusted in us, and I think it turned out well. And then obviously that first episode, Women in Geophysics, was, again, that same theme, taking audio from people who are leaders in the field and putting it together a compelling story and really highlighting their work and walking away with something that we were all proud of. So some episodes that were my favorites there.
Great. Thanks to you both. What have been your takeaways in your time working on the podcast?
What you were sharing there was really one of the things that I always get is just the excitement and just the excitement and the engagement that all the people that I speak to on geophysics or geosciences for the podcast bring to the subject. There is just such an enthusiasm and curiosity and love for what they're doing that in my engagement with a lot of other fields, I just don't get that sense. They just genuinely really love what they are doing. And I've spoken to people, from students to people retired doing other things, and they still just all have that excitement and curiosity about the world and about their work. And it's really something that I think about in my own work. As Isaac said, we're not geophysicists or geoscientists, and just looking for work and looking for ways to bring that excitement and energy and just fascination with the work that I have is something that always inspires me when I speak with them. So that has just been something that has always interested me. And I think the other big takeaway is that this stuff is really hard, that what geophysicists do is very difficult, and it is a science, and they have amazing tools and technology and skills to do what they do. But at the end of the day, they are just making their best recommendation based on the information that they have and the time that they have it. And sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. It's a nice, Isaac brought up the pandemic. I mean, just right now, going through a time of the unknown, it's just a good lesson in life. Like, things sometimes are very difficult and hard, and you just have to do the best with the information that you have. And I always really like how geophysicists are constantly looking to improve themselves, gain new skills, gain new abilities. And that's a good thing to do. But at the end of the day, all you can do is just the best that you can with the information that you have. And that's something that I think about quite regularly.
Isaac, any thoughts about that?
Yeah, there's a lot of satisfaction in just knowing that we were able to provide a platform to do exactly what Andrew just said, which I think that comes across for me when I was working on the podcast, and even now when I listen back to episodes that I worked on and episodes that have been produced since I left SEG, is just that enthusiasm and the love of science and the opportunity. I don't know that all of the folks that we've interviewed, as we were preparing for this exercise, Andrew, Ted, and I were reflecting on how many podcasts we have done and how many podcasts that some of the people that we've interviewed have done. And for many of them, it was their first time being interviewed on a podcast. And that comes through having a platform, having a space, a new space, a different space to talk about what you're passionate about and passionate for. It's a special thing. And there's a great deal of satisfaction knowing that I played a small role in that, and being able to listen to new episodes. Again, I'm not a geoscientist, but I do listen from time to time to the SEG podcast, and that enthusiasm comes through. And it was great to work on, and great to know that I played my part to be able to help scientists share their love.
One thing that I think the podcast continues to do well is to explore areas of geophysics that are not necessarily the most mainstream, but are in the direction of where applied geophysics most needs to go to help address some of the world's most pressing problems. CO2 sequestration, geothermal, planetary exploration. So excellent job selecting areas of focus and interview subjects who are willing to use the medium of the spoken word to share their insights and introduce people who may not be technically very sophisticated or strong into some new concepts for those who are more lay listeners rather than those just in the SEG membership. I've been honored to be part of this 5th anniversary episode, and honored and pleased to be with both of you again.
Yeah, thank you for the suggestion, Ted. It had honestly totally missed my mind that it was a 5-year anniversary. So it was special that you brought it up and wanted to do something like this. So thanks for doing that.
It's an important milestone in SEG communications.
Thanks for this opportunity, Ted. It's great to hear your voice and to chat through some fond memories.
Thank you for listening to SEG's flagship podcast, Seismic Soundoff. SEG produces these episodes to benefit its members, the geophysics community, and inform the public on the value of the science. To show your support for the show, please share this episode with a friend, colleague, or manager that would enjoy hearing this show. Your recommendation is the single best action you can take on behalf of SEG's podcast. To receive the latest episodes first, follow Seismic Soundoff on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Google Podcasts. The SEG podcast team is Ted Bakamjian, Kathy Gamble, and Ally McGinnis. Thank you for listening. This is Seismic Soundoff, signaling off.